Alaskan Bush People cast members who are dead or in jail. They built their whole lives around one promise: survive together, no matter what. For over a decade, the Brown family made millions of viewers believe that a rugged mountain and a will to live off the grid could hold any family together. But once the cameras stopped rolling, the Rayall story turned out to be far messier than anything Alaska's wilderness ever threw at them. Arrests, hospital rooms, funerals, and family feuds that played out in police reports instead of on screen. Today, we're breaking down which Alaskan Bush People cast members have passed away, which ones have landed behind bars, and what their lives look like now. Stick around, because the final name on this list is the one that left longtime fans the most shaken. Let's start with the man who built the whole world this show was based on, Billy Brown. Billy was the patriarch of the family, and the reason Discovery Channel had a show to make in the first place. Born in Texas in 1952, Billy lost his parents and a sibling in a plane crash when he was a teenager, a loss that reportedly pushed him toward a nomadic, self-reliant life. He eventually became a commercial fisherman in Alaska, married Ami, and together they raised 7 children in some of the most remote terrain in North America. Billy wasn't just a father figure on the show. He was the architect of the family's entire off-grid philosophy, teaching his kids to build, hunt, and survive without modern conveniences. His life wasn't free of legal trouble. Back in 1980, he was charged in connection with a horse theft case, and decades later, he and several of his children faced charges tied to falsely claiming Alaska residency in order to collect permanent fund dividend payments, while the family was actually living outside the state. But it was his health that ultimately caught up with him. Billy had lived with seizures for years, and cameras had captured some of his more severe episodes during filming. In 2019, he collapsed while struggling to breathe, and doctors later discovered his heart was failing. Physicians reportedly warned him repeatedly that living at high altitude was dangerous for his condition, but Billy refused to leave the mountain he loved. On February 7th, 2021, Billy passed away after suffering a seizure. He was 68 years old. His son Bear shared the news online, calling him our best friend and describing how much he taught the family about living life on their own terms. Discovery Channel released a statement mourning him as a trailblazer, and the network later aired a tribute episode honoring his legacy. His death reshaped the entire direction of the series, and many fans say the show was never quite the same afterward. In the months that followed, the family also found themselves dealing with a lawsuit from one of Billy's former business partners, who claimed he was owed a share of profits tied to the family's ventures, adding legal stress on top of their grief. Even so, the family pressed forward, returning for another season that focused heavily on how they were learning to carry on without the man who had shaped their entire way of life. Next is Matt Brown, the eldest of the Brown siblings, whose struggles played out publicly for years. Matt's battle with alcohol addiction became known to fans in 2016 after a DUI arrest led him to enter rehab. He returned to treatment more than once over the following years, including a stay at a well-known recovery center, and spoke openly to the press about wanting to get his life back on track. His parents were supportive publicly, with Billy once saying the family would rather see Matt get help than lose him for good. Matt's relationship with the show became increasingly strained, and by 2019, he had exited the series without a clear explanation given on air. In 2018, 2 women came forward with serious sexual assault allegations against Matt, describing separate incidents that reportedly happened within days of each other. The claims were reported to police and reviewed by prosecutors, who ultimately declined to file charges. Even without criminal charges, the allegations effectively ended Matt's time on the show and caused a rift with several of his siblings. Since then, Matt has largely stepped away from the spotlight, settling in a small town in Washington state, where he lives a quiet, off-grid life and works on a local farm. He's built a significant following on social media, where he now focuses much of his content on sobriety and personal growth, and he reportedly reconciled with his father before Billy's passing in 2021. Matt has also spoken more openly in recent years about how difficult it was to distance himself from the family business while trying to stay sober, saying the pressures of filming made recovery harder than it already was. Today, his online presence looks almost nothing like the version of him fans saw during his roughest years on the show, with most of his posts centered on hiking, homesteading projects, and encouraging others going through their own struggles with addiction. Then there's Ami Brown, the family's matriarch, whose health scare became one of the most emotional storylines the show ever covered. During filming in 2017, Ami began experiencing severe back pain that doctors initially couldn't explain. Further testing revealed she had advanced lung cancer, and her odds of survival were reported to be extremely low. She underwent months of chemotherapy and radiation at a hospital in California, a process that left her severely underweight and physically depleted. Against long odds, Ami's cancer went into remission, a moment the family has described as one of the most emotional of their lives. She continues to need regular scans to monitor for any recurrence. Her health scares didn't stop there. In early 2025, Ami was hospitalized again, this time with a serious respiratory illness that required intensive care. Family members shared updates online as she gradually recovered, and by the following month she was reported to be stable and improving. As of the most recent updates, Ami remains cancer-free and continues to be an active presence in her children's and grandchildren's lives. Through it all, Ami has remained a steady, calming figure for her adult children, many of whom have described leaning on her during their own personal crises over the years. Fans have often pointed to her resilience. First beating a cancer diagnosis, doctors gave almost no chance of survival, and then bouncing back from a serious respiratory scare years later, as one of the more remarkable through lines of the entire series. Joshua, known to fans as Bam Bam, was always one of the quieter, more private Brown siblings, but he wasn't immune to legal trouble. In 2016, prosecutors brought a large batch of charges against Billy, Ami, and several of their children connected to the same residency fraud allegations tied to state benefit applications. As part of a plea agreement, Bam Bam and Billy each pleaded guilty to a single misdemeanor charge, were ordered to repay the improperly collected funds, and served short jail sentences along with community service. Since leaving the show, Bam Bam has kept a low profile, building a life with his partner away from cameras. In 2020, he was involved in a serious car accident after another vehicle crossed into his lane. Authorities determined he was not at fault. Friends close to the family have suggested that some of the tension between Bam Bam and his siblings around that time stemmed from how his relationship was initially received, though he said very little about it publicly. These days, he rarely appears in front of camera at all, choosing instead to let his younger siblings carry the public side of the family story. Bear Brown, known for his high-energy personality, faced his own legal troubles in 2022 when he was arrested and charged with fourth-degree domestic violence assault following an incident at his home involving his then-wife, Raven Adams. According to police report, an argument escalated and Bear was accused of physically restraining Raven while trying to take her phone. Officers noted a scratch on her hand. He spent the weekend in jail before being released and later resolved the case through a plea agreement. Bear and Raven had an on-again, off-again relationship for years before marrying in January 2022, welcoming 3 sons together. The couple announced their separation in 2025, citing a mutual decision to focus on co-parenting. Raven has since gotten engaged to her girlfriend, and by all accounts the former couple has maintained an amicable co-parenting relationship, with Bear publicly wishing her well. Meanwhile, the show's extended hiatus has largely been attributed to corporate restructuring at Discovery's parent company, rather than any issue within the family itself. Bear has remained one of the most vocal Browns on social media, regularly posting updates about his kids, and occasionally addressing rumors about the show's future, which he insists could still return depending on how the network's ownership situation shakes out. Gabe Brown has always stood apart from his siblings by staying almost entirely out of the public eye. Unlike some of his brothers, he chose to remain close to his in-laws in Washington state rather than relocating, prioritizing stability for his wife and children. Billy's death in 2021 hit Gabe especially hard. Months afterward, he opened up on social media about the emotional weight he'd been carrying, describing how heavy grief could feel even while trying to hold things together for his family. He later named one of his children in tribute to his father. Gabe continues to live privately with his wife and their 2 daughters, largely avoiding the spotlight that so many of his siblings have stepped into. Noah Brown built a reputation on the show as the family's resident engineer, known for tackling ambitious projects like bringing running water to their off-grid homestead. In more recent years, Noah's personal life became entangled in a bitter family conflict with his youngest sister, Rain. In 2024, Noah and his then-wife saw a protective order against Rain, alleging a pattern of threatening statements dating back years. A court ultimately denied the request, citing insufficient evidence and the age of the incidents described. Tensions boiled over again in 2025, when Noah contacted authorities requesting a welfare check on his mother and sister amid concerns about their well-being. Rain was arrested shortly afterward on unrelated charges, described below. In mid-2025, Rain publicly leveled a serious childhood abuse accusation against Noah, which he firmly denied. Despite the very public rift, the siblings reportedly crossed paths by chance in early 2026 and began mending their relationship, with both acknowledging things had been said that they regretted. Snowbird Brown, often called Burr by her family, was one of the original cast members when the show premiered in 2014. During filming in 2022, she began experiencing severe abdominal pain that turned out to be caused by large tumors on her ovaries. She underwent emergency surgery to remove them. Doctors determined the growths were not cancerous, though they warned there was a meaningful risk of cancer developing if they returned. Snowbird has needed ongoing monitoring in the years since, including additional procedures after fluid developed near her surgical site, and by 2024 she reported no signs of the tumors coming back. She since started sharing health and lifestyle updates with fans through her own YouTube channel. Snowbird has said the experience changed how she thinks about her long-term plans, including decisions around starting a family, and she's continued to require regular blood work to stay ahead of any recurrence. Fans have praised her for being candid about a health scare that could have easily been kept private. After the very public conflict between them, Ray and Alicia, who married Noah in 2018, spent years navigating tension within the Brown family, particularly with her sisters-in-law. She and Noah shared 2 young sons together. In early 2025, the couple announced they were separating after several years of marriage, describing an effort to keep things amicable for the sake of their children. Rain later filed for divorce and has since moved on to a new relationship, while she and Noah continue to co-parent. And finally, Raven Adams, whose relationship with Bear Brown was one of the most talked about storylines to come out of the franchise. The two met at a family wedding in 2018, and their romance was defined by repeated breakups and reconciliations even before their son River was born in 2020. In 2020, Raven filed for a protective order against Bear, alleging troubling behavior, before the couple later reconciled and married in January 2022. 2 months into their marriage, Bear was arrested on the domestic violence charge mentioned earlier. Raven also found herself facing legal trouble of her own in 2025 in connection with the same case involving her husband Josiah's family that led to Rain and Josiah's arrests. She and Bear announced their split in 2025 after 3 years of marriage, agreeing to co-parent their 3 sons. Since then, Raven has entered a new relationship with her girlfriend, Caitlin Webb, and the couple announced their engagement in early 2026. Despite the very public ups and downs, Raven has continued to prioritize stability for her children, reportedly driving hours on a regular basis, so they can spend time with their father, and by most accounts, she and Bear have settled into a peaceful co-parenting arrangement. Looking back at everything the Brown family has been through, it's clear that surviving the wilderness was never really their biggest challenge. Health scares, legal battles, and painful family rifts tested them in ways the show's cameras could only partially capture. Some of them found their way back to each other, while others are still working through the fallout. Either way, their story is a reminder that even the toughest, most self-sufficient families face struggles no mountain can prepare them for. What's striking is how many of these storylines never made it into a single episode. The show gave viewers a curated look at survival skills and wilderness adventures, but the real drama, the arrests, the diagnoses, the falling outs, mostly played out afterward, in interviews, court documents, and social media posts the families share on their own terms. For a lot of longtime fans, learning the fuller picture has only deepened their respect for a family that kept showing up for each other, even when the cameras weren't rolling, and even when things were falling apart behind the scenes. That brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the Brown family's journey, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on the cast of your favorite reality shows.